Good morning. This is Jason D coming live at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It's about 9:38 here on a nice and snowy winter day. Hope everyone's doing good. Thanks again for everyone's support. We just reached just about 200 subscribers, so keep showing the love. Really appreciate people commenting more on a lot of these videos. It's been a blast. I'm going to be doing next weekend. I'm going to be doing another interview segment, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to be having the manager of Flagship Cinema on my show. We're going to be doing like a in-person interview, and I think it's gonna be an interesting talk because we're going to try to focus on kind of the dilemma that we're in now. I think a lot of people to a degree don't really concern themselves with it, and then also a lot of people do think about it, but I think most people, it's a thing of where, I don't know, it's maybe a secondary thought, if that. But the show's gonna be basically centered on, kind of where the film industry is at right now, as with how movie theaters can somehow function, and how films are competing with each other, whether it's in a theater setting, like an actual movie theater, it's like a physical location that you go to, or a streaming service, which is now the new thing. Still, theaters are very, very much a viable thing. And I think at the end of the day, it's an experience that people will always want. But sometimes I wonder, could it go away? And I could definitely see that happening, or it just getting harder and harder to have that experience because of the streaming scenario. So Kaylee, who is the manager at Flagship, she's going to be a guest on the show. So we're going to be talking mostly about that kind of dilemma, and where kind of where we're at, as far as how we watch media and watch movies and all these things. So I think it's gonna be a real interesting thing. It's something, obviously, it's a subject matter that I think a lot about, and it's a subject that I also care very. I have a deep care for it, because I feel like that experience of going to a theater is a magical experience, and I think, without getting too or coming across as too um, I don't know, intellectual or too lofty about it, or lofty around it. I think it's one of the best aspects of how we interact as people. I think it's part of that ritualistic aspect that we all have as a species. I kind of feel like I've talked about other ideas around that, with the idea of, well, for example, when Spencer Roulard from Method Manus was on the show, we talked about all kinds of things, and one of the biggest focuses that we did talk about was the film going experience, and how it is at the end of the day. Yeah, it's a great thing to experience. It's a full on kind of escapist environment, and it has it's there's like two levels of it. I think on one level, it's about obviously going out with your friends, or just going out to a theater by yourself, or whatever it is. and just kind of, escaping for a couple of hours and just having an entertaining ride, hopefully, if it's a good movie. But then on the other side, on a little bit of a deeper level, I think it's a cathartic thing, but I also feel it's very ritualistic. It's kind of how we are as a species. It's been in our DNA. And I remember during our discussion that we had, which was an awesome interview. I definitely suggest if anybody out there who's a fan of this channel, and if they haven't seen the video, it was we did it about 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was just a really cool interview. Spencer was pretty amazing, and it was a longer show. We ended up talking about the show went for about an hour and a half. Usually the interview segments go for about an hour, but this one was really great because we got into a lot of interesting territory, and we at the end of it we could have kept going. I talked to Spencer about maybe doing a part two, so I think we're going to do like a second part down the road. So, but I definitely suggest people checking it out because we have a lot in common as far as what brought us together to do that interview was, we're both electronic artists, but we also take a big, a big huge source of our inspiration is from film and the whole kind of aesthetic. So that was like our commonality and our thing that we both were really on the same page. Um, we were both directly on the same page together with that whole idea. So that was like a springboard, and then we went to other areas. But we really talked a lot about the whole theater going experience. And we even talked a little bit about the idea of, that ritualistic aspect, but then also, kind of where it's part of our DNA, and it that's one of the reasons that organized religions are part of our culture. And we talked about. I brought up the point to talk a little bit about, without getting too heavy-handed and without going too off the rails, but I talked about the idea that we are we're animals, and one of the allures of ritual, and particularly around organized religion, is that there's a somewhat of a collective gathering around like-minded people where you're either celebrating something, or your focus is all on one particular thing. And it's religion itself, organized religion, yes, it's caused the death of countless amounts of people, and there's been genocide and all kinds of examples of just horrendous treatment in the name of what you would say God is. But my point of bringing it up was trying to bringing it to a different kind of level, or talking a little bit about a different aspect of it. And it was mostly centered around the ritualistic aspect of it. So, and I was talking about how, for example, there are nowadays there's like lots of groups that claim to be atheists, and that there are these, which is kind of a paradox, but there's like these groups of these atheist collectives, for example, that are almost like political groups, and they basically go around saying that and degrading organized religion. And a lot of those their key points I agree with, but they also take it a step further where they, because it's the land of make believe, and that it's all myth, and it doesn't culturally doesn't have any significance, and there isn't any aspects of that we should hold on to. We should just basically let that go. And I had said that, well, I'm pretty much hardcore atheist, but I understand certain aspects of religion and what they do provide for people. And it's subjective to say whether you agree or not, or disagree with it. And for the most part, I do disagree with a lot of how that works. But the ritualistic aspect and that celebratory collective kind of experience, is something in our DNA, and it's kind of our part of our lizard brain. And I was talking about people like Joseph Campbell, that basically are one of my key figures. That are he's an incredible source of inspiration for me personally. But basically saying on how the idea of myth and the power of myth, you can trace it back since the dawn of man. But that and it also shows how we are all kind of connected in a lot of ways. We're very different as a species, but we are very connected in this universal, facet. And with the atheistic view, particularly like when I was talking about these groups that have kind of emerged, where they kind of want to distance themselves from all aspects of that and to basically leave it all behind, and that it doesn't have any significance and there's nothing important to use from it. And in Joseph Campbell's world, he brings that to the forefront, saying, "Well, no, that is part of our that is our that's part of being human. We kind of can't really deny that, and that actually is a very integral part to how we are. It represents who we are. It holds mirrors up to society. It holds mirrors up to us personally, and it's something that we do anyway. It's that experience." And talking about other things related to that, with birthday parties, we all, whether or not we believe in God or believe in gods, or or if we're part of religion or we're not a part of any kind of organized religion, we still as a species always on a daily basis celebrate something in a ritualistic way. And also, I think in a lot of ways where we probably don't even think about it. And I was talking about, we all go to birthday parties where there's, candles put on the cake, and there's presents given. We all like, to various degrees celebrate holidays. Halloween, for example, we dress up as, gothic horror characters, or we wear masks, and we all go to people who celebrate Christmas. There's the lights and the pageantry and the that whole aesthetic. We go to sporting events, baseball games, hockey games. We all love and go to concerts. And I feel like that's exactly the same. That's a ritualistic experience. All of those things have a commonality to it. And going to the movie theater, having that experience to me is exactly the same thing. So it's just part of who we are. So we always seek it out, and I think people do it in a way of where they crave that experience, but then there's a lot of times people don't think of it maybe in those terms. But to me, that's a big, a real large centerpiece of what organized religion is. And I feel like, moving forward with how people stream and access movies, it's gonna, it's an interesting time to see. There's definitely moments of where I feel it could just go away and it could just disappear. But I think there are people who will always love it and crave it, and it will always be around to some degree. A few months ago when the Colonial Theater closed, I was, it was sad. I kind of saw the writing on the wall, but it was sad. And then there was a point where, in the Colonial Theater is a local theater here right in Belfast. A beloved institution, and it's been closed now for a while. There's rumors of it, maybe opening to some other kind of capacity, some maybe one sole owner, or maybe some kind of collective thing. We'll see. But right as of now, it's closed, and there's no definite plans for it to open. So the only local theater that actually shows movies regularly is Flagship. So that's where Kaylee will be coming in. We're going to be talking about all those things. The Strand Cinema is also another theater in Rockland, and that's a different kind of a model. It seems that they're following a model that is kind of a trend now, where movie theaters are adapting a broader things of a broader sense, or a broader, more varied things in the entertainment, that they'll show documentaries, they have concerts, they have comedy nights. It's not strictly just a movie theater. At one point, it was. They do show movies, but they show films in a very limited release, and also in a capacity to a smaller capacity. It's still known as a movie theater, but it's also more of an arts center now. But Flagship Cinema is really the only local theater that is strictly a movie theater, where a movie comes out, and it will be there for its like theatrical run, a few weeks or a month or whatever. So, and they were, over the summer, they were facing that strong possibility that they might close. And there was an article, I believe, where Kaylee was interviewed, and suddenly people, in our town and in our area, were chiming in and reading this, and they were like, "Wow, we really, we don't want this to go away, because this is the only theater. We want that experience." And from what I've heard, and from what I've gathered, and also from what I've seen, I do go there to see the movies, and I noticed since that whole thing happened this summer, there has been a bigger flux, and more of people filling the seats and showing up there. So it's very interesting. And also too, now with the trend of movies that are, you know, two a few examples are, last year I saw the Hellraiser remake, which I thought was one of the better movies that came out in 2022, but it was only available streaming. It was only available through Hulu, and I watched it over a friend's house, and I very much liked it. But I wish I got to see it on the big screen. It was never released on the big screen, and there's no plans of it. And I'm not sure what the status is of it as far as its future release, say on Blu-ray or DVD or 4K. I'm not sure what's going on with that. There's another movie I've been wanting to see pretty badly, but I haven't seen it, and it's a the Predator movie called Prey. I've heard that that's a really great movie. I've been wanting to see that for a while, and that's another movie where it's been only available on streaming, and there's no plans, as far as what I know, more so about that movie. There's no plans for them to release that film in any kind of physical form, which is crazy. And I've heard a lot of people now complaining online, particularly a few film critics and YouTube guys and girls, saying it. Well, that I've heard that movie's also really really good, but I've heard that people have complained about, damn, wish there was an opportunity to see that on a big screen, to have that real experience, as opposed to like watching it at home on a pretty decent TV or a sound system. You just can't really, it doesn't really compare to having that experience. And then the other day I saw there was a press release or an article about a new Alien movie coming out, and I think it might also be like a series, a TV series. And I think some of the people that were involved with the last Predator movie, that I've heard is really, really good. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm dying to see it. I've heard that some of the same people, producers, whatnot, are involved with this new Alien film or TV show. But they've already announced, they said it in the same article, that they have no plans on putting it out in the theater at all. So it's a weird time. On one hand, there seems to be still great. I mean, there's still like lots of great films coming out, and great quality films and content. That won't ever stop. But that experience of going to a dark into a dark room with a bunch of strangers seems like it's getting smaller and smaller. So I'm concerned about that. And I think it's good that people are showing their disappointment that studios are not, doing that. On the other hand, it is something that is very much a part of our culture, and it is still making money. You know, Tom Cruise's Maverick, Top Gun, the last Spider-Man movie, Into the Multiverse, the Batman. There's been some films that have been massively successful in the box office, and also Dune, Denis Villeneuve's last film, and now with the second chapter coming out this year, I believe, later this year. Those made a tremendous amount of money in the box office, and those films were kind of made, especially Dune, and I feel like the new Top Gun film were made especially for that experience. So, you have these two things going on. So it's interesting to see where it will all be and where it will go. I just, as a fan, I hope it doesn't go away, and I don't think it will. But anyway, so I'm really excited about this today's show. This was a movie I've been wanting to get to for a long time. I really love this movie. I just watched it again the other night. I've only seen it a few times, and again, it was one of those films I just discovered, kind of out of the blue. And it's this movie here called She Freak. One of the best horror exploitation movies I've ever seen. And it was written and produced by David.S.Friedman. And I've talked about David.S.Friedman quite a bit on these shows before, particularly around my coverage of some of his films, but then just talking about him in general. But one of my favorite exploitation directors, Herschel Gordon Lewis, otherwise known as the godfather of gore. David Friedman and Herschel Gordon Lewis worked together for many, many years on collaborating on a whole bunch of these great classic kind of exploitation movies. And David Friedman came out of the kind of the adult film industry, and eventually moved into the exploitation world and started making these, incredible movies with Herschel Gordon Lewis. Blood Feast, 2000 Maniacs, The Wizard of Gore, She Devils on Wheels, Color Me Blood Red. I mean, all of these great exploitation classics. Dave Friedman was the producer on all of these films. He basically helped finance these movies, and he basically was like the ad guy who got these movies to be sold and to be seen. So I was in Bull Moose in Bangor. It was probably about a year ago or so, maybe a little less. I was in the Bangor Bull Moose, and I saw this movie, She Freak, and I never seen it before. I never heard of it, and I didn't realize that aside from Dave Friedman, producing and being heavily involved with all of the early classic Herschel Gordon Lewis movies that I really love, I didn't realize that he was also directly involved with writing films, where his name was on that, in that level, or that was another thing that he also did. I thought he was more of just behind the scenes guy, producing the films, helping financing them, getting them financed, but then also doing all of the marketing. So I was like, wow, I didn't know he actually wrote a movie, and I looked at this movie and I was just like, the cover, the artwork is just so great, and it's amazing. It's such an awesome movie. It is the epitome of exploitation. And I just watched it the other night, and oh God, I just love it. It came out in 1967, which is just wild, The other thing that's just so wild to me, which I didn't know, and I after watching it again the other night, obviously there's similarities, but I didn't know it was directly taken from that as a sole inspiration. I did a show on Todd Browning's Freaks, which is another just amazing movie from the 30s, exploitation world, 101. And I didn't realize that that movie or that book was a direct inspiration for She Freak, even though it's a very different story. But it's centered around a carnival, and it's centered around these people who have these abnormalities, and that they're kind of exploited. But it does go in very different. It's very different. But I didn't realize that that was that classic story Freaks by Todd Browning in film was kind of the sole inspiration. I thought that was super interesting. And again, the thing about this movie is it's centered on this woman who is part of this carnival atmosphere, and it's centered around this freak show. But it's mostly the film is actually really slow, and it's kind of centered around the people who kind of run the show. They don't really focus too much on the aspects of the people who are actually the attraction. It's basically centered on this woman who is part of the industry, and she's like bouncing back and forth between different jobs that she's doing in the freak show circuit. She was also a professional stripper, and it goes into that, and it also goes into like these various relationships that she's had with these different guys. And it's a very slow movie, but it's so cool. Like the atmosphere and the music is just awesome for this film. It's one of the best soundtracks. It's like surf rock, rockabilly, uh, jazz. Like it's got all of this cool stuff. It's just great. It's one of the best soundtracks, and the color and the way the cinematography is for this film is just like pure pulp, and just it's so gorgeous to look at visually. It's one of the greatest exploitation movies, and like again, I'm just blown away, but that this came out in '67. I mean, it's just wild. And over time during the story, over the course of watching this movie, you start seeing that this main character is really kind of this really maniacal, manipulative person who's like taking advantage of people, and she like eventually uh, goes down this path of where she hires somebody to basically kill her one of her lovers to basically take all of his money. And she, you see this. It opens up. The first half of the film. It's a very kind of light, entertaining film. Very pulpy, and it's like pure like exploitation. Beautiful cinematography. It's super funny. It's super goofy. Amazing music, but it's just great atmosphere. But it's kind of light. But then as you go into the film, you start seeing that she's actually a really kind of vile person, and basically by the end, she, the people who become aware of the crime that she committed or crimes, basically seek revenge on her, and they turn her into this total freak. There's this whole situation happens, and then she becomes, at the end of it, she becomes like the main attraction in the show. And it's wild, like it's trippy as all hell. And I love that it's a really slow movie, and then it gets pretty serious, and it gets pretty violent, it gets pretty out there, it gets super weird and psychedelic, and and by the time you're at the last half, the third act, the last 20 minutes, half hour, it's pretty intense, and it's pretty bonkers. And it's like kind of a revenge tale, what you reap is what you sow. And it's amazing. It's an amazing film. I was so surprised. I was super excited when I first saw this in the shop, because I didn't know Dave Friedman, like I said before, was also a producer. Just super cool. And again, one of the coolest aspects of this film is the music. And the music was all composed by William Allen Castleman. And he was born in 1922 in Santa Monica, California. He was a composer and a producer, known for Johnny Firecloud, which came out in 1975, and Bummer, that came out in 73. Um, he worked on a whole bunch of films, scoring a whole bunch of films. Again, he's a guy I just recently discovered through this movie. The films that he worked on and he scored music for were films such as Bummer, Johnny Firecloud, She Freak, The Big Birdcage, which came out in 72, The Swinging, Space Thing in 1968. Um, just wild. Just wild. Sexy Space box set, 1968. The Wrestler, 1974. The Defilers, um, The Acid Eaters, which I've heard is a really awesome movie. That is one movie I've heard a lot about. The Devil's Mistress. It's tremendous. And again, this is another example of why I love taking chances and taking deep dives and really lucking out, having some really good luck with buying movies I've never seen before and discovering all of these, you know, epic exploitation movies. And this is a film too. I have a friend, my friend Nikki, who comes over a lot, and from what I gather, like she likes films, but she's obviously not into films like I am. But she has a pretty open mind to lots of things, which I really think is cool. And she start she was working in Camden a lot, and then we become good friends. We've become good friends, and then she'll come over, and she had a huge commute all the time from work, so a lot of times she would stay here. And we started watching a bunch of movies together, and she wasn't really familiar with the exploitation world. Obviously, everybody's kind of familiar with you know quote unquote B movies and things like that, but not she's never explored that world too heavily. And we started watching a lot of exploitation movies together. I was like, hey, you want to check this out? What do you think? And I found that she seemed like she was really enjoying a lot of these films. But I know my favorite style, like I've said, is horror based science fiction exploitation movies, particularly around the slasher films. That kind of style is not really for her, but she's open to lots of other things. And we've watched a lot of things that are kind of non horror based as far as exploitation movies. And this is one movie I've been wanting to show her. I think this is a great movie for people who might be new to this kind of genre or to this older style of filmmaking that still is very influential on new movies. And it's definitely a horror movie, but it's not very gory. It's I don't know, it's got this really relaxing quality, but it's a really great story, and it's just bonkers. But there's not like copious amounts of gore or even sex for that matter. But I think this would be a really good film to check out for people who, are new to this kind of style. Like this would be a great kind of introduction. Just awesome. Can't recommend this enough. The transfer of this on Blu-ray is just amazing. I got this really cheap. The only thing is it doesn't really have special features on it. There are a couple of commentary tracks, which I haven't checked out yet, but I will. But yeah, 1963, She Freak. This movie is just awesome. So thanks again. I hope everybody is enjoying the snow. We're supposed to get a lot of snow today. It seems like it's starting to taper off. So this is Jason Dean signing off here at Film Fanatic headquarters. And if you like this page, please like and subscribe to it. I love that there's other strange people out there in the universe that like these strange videos that I do. So it's very cool. So thanks again, everyone, and we will see you next time. Peace.